Dear friends, Apiskatava, Gut Kvital, Gut Yar, welcome to this week's virtual Drasha. This week we have the incredible privilege to Parshas Haazinu. And in Parshas Haazinu, Moshe Rabbeinu continues to prepare his beloved flock for their entry into Eretz Yisrael. And in this week's Parsha, what Moshe Rabbeinu does is he tries, as he's been doing already beforehand, to re-energize, re-solidify, reconquertize the covenantal relationship between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael. And to that end, he says, Haazinu hashamayim va'adabera v'asishma aretz imrefi. Literally translated, listen heavens and I will speak, like Haazinu, like ozen, like ear. Listen heavens and I will speak. V'asishma ha'aretz imrefi. And the earth will hear the utterances of my lips. And Rashi HaKadosh explains that Moshe Rabbeinu is bringing heaven and earth to be the witnesses to the nature of the relationship, to the responsibilities that Klal Yisrael has to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to Klal Yisrael. Whereas if Moshe Rabbeinu would have brought human witnesses, again, we're born and we die, but heaven and earth will be here forever, so therefore there are eternal witnesses to the responsibilities and to the beauty of this relationship between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael. And the Kasker, the Heilige Kasker, Menachem Mendel of Kask, asks a simple question. He says, Moshe Rabbeinu, it's a pretty dramatic thing that you call upon the heavens to listen to you. Haazinu hashamayim, listen heavens. Earth, listen to the utterances of my lips. Says the Katzker. This doesn't shtim, it doesn't make more sense. After all, the Torah says in just a little while about Moshe Rabbeinu, Va'ish Moshe anav mikalad. Well, we learned it earlier. Moshe Rabbeinu was the humblest of all men. So asks the Katzker, Moshe Rabbeinu haya anav mikalad, and the Torah itself testifies that Moshe Rabbeinu was the most humble of all men in Parashas Chukas. After the episode with Aaron and Miriam speaking about Moshe, Moshe was the humblest of all men. So how could it be that the humblest of all men, the Ketzad Hirhiv Lomar, Haazinu hashamayim, Katzker says, it seems like a little bit of gaiva, seems like a little bit of arrogance. You're calling on, the heavens should listen to you, the earth should listen to the utterances of your lips. Sounds Moshe is so humble. And yet again, he sounds like he has the power to call upon the heaven and earth to testify to what he is saying. Heaven, listen to me. Earth, listen to me. So ask the Katzker, how does this shtim, how does this jive with the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu was known as the humblest of all men? And the Katzker says something so beautiful. He says, Kol kama sha'adam yoseh shafal be'inav. The more humble a person is, specifically in his own eyes, yesh lo yoser hazuchos litvoa me'ashamayim she'yatzisu lo. The more humble you are, the more you have the right to ask the heavens to listen to you. So the Katzker is teaching us a tremendous lesson in humility. The more humble I am, the more powerful I am. Humility is one of the most incredible midos, one of the most incredible character traits that a person could possess. Why? Because the greatest pitfall for man is kochi va'otzem yadi asali esachai lazeh, is a feeling of self-reliance. Everything I do is because of me. All of my accomplishments are because of me. It's human nature. It's almost our default setting to be egocentric, to be self-centered, and to really just focus on our own needs and to assume that our accomplishments are ours and ours alone. It's interesting. Our failures and our faults, those we outsource. I can tell you who is responsible in my life for all of my failures and my shortcomings. But my successes, ani agever, I'm the man. Those are mine. The pitfall of humanity is this self-centered egocentricity. As HaKadosh Baruch Hu pre-programmed us for some reason. Humility is the midah which causes us to go against the grain of our very factory settings. And therefore, again, says the Katzker, a person who is able to be humble is more powerful than anyone else. A person who is truly humble could go ahead and call the heaven and earth to listen to his words. So Moshe Rabbeinu, the Anav Mikal Adam, his humility gave him the power to demand that the heavens and the earth listen to what he says. But I think the Katzker is really helping to address something else. I think Katzker is saying that we often misunderstand the midah of humility. And that we think that humility means, we sometimes confuse humility with a lack of self-worth, right? That humility means feeling like you're nothing, feeling bad about yourself, feeling down about yourself, but that's not humility. That's poor self-esteem. That's a lack of self-worth. Humility is where a person realizes exactly what they are, exactly what they've accomplished, exactly who they are. But then when I see who I am and what I've accomplished, I'm humbled by the knowledge that I could be so much more. That for every accomplishment, there's 3 more that are within reach. And for every milestone, there's so much more that can be done. And for every race and finish line that I cross, there are so many more incredible and beautiful things in life that I could be doing. It's success that engenders a sense of humility, not a lack of self-worth. I recognize what I've done, who I have become, my accomplishments. But those accomplishments then humble me, because if I could accomplish X, Y, and Z, that means I could also be doing A, B, C, and D. I think that's the Kotzker is saying. A person who possesses a midah of humility, that midah, that trait, encourages and spurs me to more action. It is the catalyst for dynamic growth. And how incredible is it to learn this yisod, literally Motzei Yom Kippur? Because I think there are many things we experience Yom Kippur, many different things, many different emotions, many different moments. And no Yom Kippur is the same, right? I think we'd all agree that the most incredible thing is, although my machzer is the same, right? The tear-soaked pages are the same, but yet my Yom Kippur experience changes year to year. But one thing I think that is part and parcel of every Yom Kippur experience, Yom Kippur is humbling. Yom Kippur is humbling. And why is Yom Kippur humbling? Because the truth is, when we do vidui, when we have to confess our averos, as much as the goal is not to make that the dominant piece of the Yom Tiv, but yet it's humbling. Because I recognize that at the end of the day, I messed up. I made mistakes. And the truth is, 99% of it could have been avoided and should have been avoided had I been living with a bit more attentiveness, had I been living with a bit more seriousness. And so Yom Kippur is humbling. But in the same time way in Yom Kippur that I take inventory of my averos, I also take inventory of my mitzvahs. And I recognize that I also accomplished a lot of good. And I did a lot of good. And there's this humility that emerges from Yom Kippur that's a combination of two things. It's being humbled by my mistakes, but it's also being humbled by the fact that I did so much good, but could have done so much more. This twofold humility. I'm humbled by my mistakes, but I'm also humbled by my accomplishments. Because I know in myself, I know that for everything that I did, for every mesechta, there could have been 2. For every dollar of tzedakah, there could have been 5. For every act of chesed, there could have been another 3. For every kind word, there could have been kind sentences. I know, if I'm honest with myself, that I underperformed. I did. I did it last year, I did it the year before, and that's humbling. And I think that sometimes the humility that comes from the underperformance of good is even more humbling than the humility that comes from the recognition of our averos. Because we all sin. We all sin. Sin is part of the dynamic of human nature. But when I look back at my life and realize that it could have been more, it could have been more. The Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh says something so beautiful. He says, do you know what Gehenna is? Do you know what Gehenna is? We don't really have the concept of like hell, like the Christian concept of hell. But we have Gehenna. So what's Gehenna? There's a lot of different variations about Gehenna. The Baal Shem Tov says, and this is the most incredible thing, Baal Shem Tov says is that after 120, in Shamayim, they show you, like Lahavdil, 2 different videos, right? Two different pictures, 2 different stories. One is the story of the life you lived, and one is the story of the life you could have lived. So Olam Haba is when those 2 reels line up. That the life you could have lived is the same life you actually lived. That's Olam Haba. What's Gehenna? Gehenna is when there's a dissonance, when there's a disconnect between those 2 video reels, those 2 movies. And the life that I lived is so dramatically different than the life that I could have lived. And for many of us, the humbling experience of Yom Kippur, ultimately again, is I know that if I had to watch the video of Tav Shin Pei Hey, I know the video that HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kiviyachol had of the life I could have lived. And by the way, I don't mean when I say the life I could have lived, like, wrapped in a talis all day, learning Kabbalah on the top of a mountain in Eretz Yisrael. That's not, that sounds great. I would love that, but chances are that is not in the cards for me and not what HaKadosh Baruch Hu has the expectations of. Like a regular, normal life, but what life could have been, what life should have been. I think for so many of us, if we're honest with ourselves, the 2 videos of what Tav Shin Pei Hey 5785 could have been and what it was are dramatically different, and that's humbling. But what the Kotzker says is, what do you do with that humility? Because sometimes it is humility itself that is the very catalyst for the greatest dynamic personalistic achievement. Sometimes when you've been humbled, when there is humility, that is when you are poised for the most incredible and dramatic growth. When I'm humbled by my averos and I recognize I really messed up, but I have the ability to do better. I'm humbled by my misdeeds, or I'm humbled by the fact that the life I led last year was not the life I could have and should have led. I'm humbled by that. Great. Now says the Kotzker, just understand, you now possess the strongest, the most powerful the character trait that a Yid could possess, humility. And once you possess humility, that is like the rocket fuel for dynamic, explosive, ridiculous growth. How do you know? Haazinu hashamayim va'adabeira vasishma aretz imrevi. Because Moshe Rabbeinu possessed the midah of anava, of humility, and because of that midah of humility allowed Moshe Rabbeinu to command the heaven and earth to listen to him. Because when you have the midah of anava, of humility, that is the rocket fuel to explosive, dynamic, personalistic life growth. When you are humbled, you control heaven and earth. And dear friends, we are humbled. On Matzah Yom Kippur, we have this feeling of elation. There's optimism, there's hope, but there's also a strong sense of humility. Because now I have such clarity. During the year, I fool myself, I delude myself. But Yom Kippur is such a beautiful day of clarity, and I'm humbled. And there's two things you could do with your humility. You could feel bad, or you could say, ooh, I'm holding now where Moshe Rabbeinu is holding. I'm holding by Moshe Rabbeinu. Chevra, when could we ever say those words? I am holding by Moshe Rabbeinu. Yes, I'm humbled by my sins. I'm humbled by my averos. And I'm humbled by the fact that even the good that I did, I could have done more. That the video for Tav Shin Pei Hey, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has one version and I have another version. He has the potential version, I have the actual version, and they do not line up. I'm humbled. But I'm humbled. I possess the midah of anava, of humility. I possess, now in these moments, in the afterglow of Yom Kippur, I possess the midah of Moshe Rabbeinu. And if Moshe Rabbeinu was one powerful man, Moshe Haazinu was able to command the heaven and earth to listen to his words. He was able to get their attention. I'm holding in the same place. Today, on Isru Chag of Yom Kippur, Erev Shabbos Kodesh Parshas Haazinu, in the afterglow of Yom Kippur, like Moshe Rabbeinu. No other day of the year that you can say like Moshe Rabbeinu. Today I can say like Moshe Rabbeinu. I have his anava. I have his humility. And with that humility, there is no telling what I can do. With that humility, I pledge to make this year different. With that humility, I'm going to try my best not to repeat the same mistakes. I'll probably make new mistakes, but that's okay. That's the way life works. But I'm going to at least try not to repeat the same mistakes. And with that humility, my entire goal is that come this time next year, I want the video reel of my life to align. I want the life I lived to be able to align with the life I could have lived. I don't want disparity. I want HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when he watches the video kiviyachol of what my Tafshin Peivav 5786 was like, I want my actual life and my potential life to be aligned. And I can make that promise. I can make that happen. Because today, heaven and earth are in my hands. Heaven and earth are in my palms. Because when I possess anava, I possess the midah that allows me to do anything and everything. Harness your humility. And like Moshe Rabbeinu, take command of your universe. Moshe Rabbeinu commanded heaven and earth. I don't need to command heaven and earth. I just need to command Shmuel Silber. Harness your humility and use it to pave the way for a beautiful, holy, and bright year ahead. Wishing everyone a good yar, a piska tava, a good kvittel, a good Erev Shabbos, and a year, Emir Hashem, of great things for us as individuals and great things, beautiful things for all of Klal Yisrael.